You know, sometimes we spend our entire lives carrying an invisible wound. A cut that doesn't bleed externally, but continues to ache deep within, even after so many years. And the strangest part is, with time, we even learn to smile through that chest pain. We learn to make coffee, say good morning, tend to the house, care for others, as if everything were all right. As if there weren't a void inside us. I was like that. I was always that strong woman, you know? The one who was always there to help. The one who raised the children alone when the husband was away. The one who sorted everything out with a dishcloth over her shoulder and faith in her heart. No one ever imagined how much I had cried in secret in the bathroom, my face buried in a towel so no one would hear. No one ever saw how much I silenced myself to avoid causing trouble. Not even my children. In my youth, I experienced something that profoundly marked me, but I never had the courage to tell anyone. Not my mother, not my husband, not even my church friends. I kept it like one keeps a letter one is too afraid to tear up, but also doesn't want to reread. I just left it there, hidden, in the depths of my soul. I thought with time, it would disappear. But it didn't. When we don't talk about pain, it grows internally. And so I lived, raising the children, washing clothes, caring for others, while forgetting myself. I thought that was love, annihilating myself for the sake of family. But today, at 82, I understand that was fear. Fear of looking at myself. Fear of facing that 18-year-old girl whose dreams were shattered so early. Who heard words no woman should ever hear. Who was judged, betrayed, silenced. On the outside, I was just a pleasant grandmother. White hair held back with a clip. Wrinkled hands that made the world's best cornbread. But inside, I was a woman still trying to piece herself back together. And you know what's saddest? No one ever asked. No one ever said, "Mom, Grandma, how are you really doing?" Because everyone assumed I was strong. And when people assume you're strong, no one notices when you break. Until one day, all of it began to weigh down. My body couldn't keep up like before. But it was my heart that was most weary. I started having strange dreams, memories that would surface out of nowhere. I'd feel an urge to cry for no reason. The pain I had hidden for so many years began to demand to be heard. And I finally understood. I either spoke up, or it would kill me in silence. That was the first time I realized there was still something inside me that needed healing. It wasn't too late. It wasn't the end yet. It was just the beginning of a new chance. When I decided to move in with my daughter, I confess it wasn't by choice. It was out of necessity. My body no longer obeyed me as it used to. My memory, at times, would fail. Climbing stairs became a challenge, bathing alone a risk. And, to be honest, the fear of falling and no one finding me there robbed me of sleep. I didn't want to be a burden. I just wanted someone nearby. My daughter welcomed me with open arms, at least, that's how it seemed at first. She took me to her home, set up a small room in the back, and said, "Here you will have peace." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because deep down, every mother's heart wants to believe she raised her children with enough love for them to know how to care for you when it's your turn to need it. But things began to change rapidly. The household routine was different. The children had their schedules. My grandchildren saw me as if I were an antique piece of furniture in the corner of the living room. And my daughter, my daughter. She changed. She no longer looked at me as she used to. She always seemed hurried, irritated. If I asked something, it was as if I were bothering her. If I offered a suggestion, I'd hear, "You don't understand how things are these days." I started to realize I was merely tolerated there. Not loved, not welcome. The food came cold. The tone of voice was harsh. When I asked for something, that silence would come before the answer. A silence that weighed more than a shout. I started avoiding speaking. I avoided leaving my room. I felt like a nuisance. Even my presence on the sofa seemed to be in the way. I remember one day my granddaughter looked at me and said, "Grandma, do you still live here?" That hurt more than anything else. And I who had spent my life caring for everyone, now had to ask permission to use the bathroom. I, who never let love be lacking in my home, was now seen as outdated. A burden. The worst loneliness is the one we feel surrounded by people. There, inside that house, full of voices, the television on, laughter in the living room. I felt invisible. And, with time, I began to wonder. Am I really a burden? Do I no longer have any value? Has all my love as a mother and grandmother been lost along the way? The saddest part is realizing that rejection doesn't just come from harsh words. At times, it manifests in a averted gaze, a pushed-aside plate, a door closed for no apparent reason. And when you depend on others, you learn to swallow hard. You learn to smile even when it hurts, because there's nowhere else to go. But something within me began to stir. I remembered the woman I once was. The strength that still resided, hidden in some corner of my chest. And I began to wonder, is this truly all that's left for me? To be rejected at the twilight of my life? To be cast aside after giving my all? It was at that precise moment that a seed was planted. A seed of change. Because no matter how old we become, we still deserve respect. We still deserve love. And, above all, we still deserve a fresh start. It all began on a quiet late afternoon. I was sitting on the bed, alone, as usual. Outside, the sounds of children playing, the hiss of the pressure cooker coming from the kitchen, and me, there, in my little nook, trying to find some meaning in this new way of living. It was then that I opened one of the dresser drawers, searching for a handkerchief, and found an old trinket box I'd completely forgotten I'd brought. Inside, there was a small, golden flower brooch. It was tiny, already a bit faded, but as I touched it, something within me unfurled. As if that small item held more than just memories. As if it contained a piece of my very soul. It felt like I had traveled back in time. I remembered the first time I received that brooch. I was young, brimming with dreams, full of life. I had just left home, convinced the world was inherently good and that people would always do the right thing. Back then, I trusted with my entire being. And it was precisely because of that unwavering trust that I was hurt so profoundly. I was betrayed by someone I trusted more than myself. Words spoken with affection, promises whispered in my ear, all of it transformed into a lie. By the time I realized it, I was alone, helpless, with a heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. That pain, I never shared with anyone. I kept it hidden, like one conceals a scar that still burns. I buried it so deeply, I convinced myself I had forgotten. But I hadn't. It was merely dormant, awaiting a gesture, an object, a scent, anything to awaken it. And that brooch was the catalyst. I wept as I hadn't wept in a very long time. A cry that emanated from the deepest part of me. A cry of someone who had swallowed words for decades. Of someone who had been too strong for too long. It was as if the young woman I once was had returned to implore me to be kind to myself. As if to say, don't forget me, please. I'm still here inside you. On that day, I realized something profoundly important. The pain we don't heal in due time transforms into a shadow. And this shadow walks with us, silently, yet ever present. It shapes our fears, our choices, even our way of loving. And when old age arrives, it doesn't recede, it screams. I also understood that part of why I felt rejected in my daughter's home stemmed from this unresolved pain. It was as if everything there reopened that old wound from the past. The lack of listening, the disinterest, the contempt. All of it reminded me of when I was left behind. Of when I learned, at a tender age, that love can hurt. And there, in the quiet of that room, I understood. This pain wasn't just from now. It was an ancient ache, one that had never been given the space to scar over. But in that crying, in that memory, something also illuminated. Because remembering wasn't just reliving the suffering. Remembering was the first step toward healing. I finally gave my pain a name. And I realized that, even with wrinkles etched on my face and weariness in my body, there was still a woman alive within me. And this woman deserved more than scraps of attention. She deserved peace. In that moment, for the first time in many years, I embraced myself. After that day I found the brooch, I was no longer the same. Something within me had shattered again, but, at the same time, another part seemed to yearn for birth. It was as if I had awakened from an incredibly deep slumber. A slumber of decades. And, for the first time in a long time, I began to ask myself, what am I waiting for to truly live? I had spent so many years serving others, tending to everything and everyone, that I forgot to care for myself. I forgot that I, too, was a person. That I, too, had desires, feelings, stories. I nullified myself so completely that I became a shadow within my own life. And in that little room, at the back of my daughter's house, I finally saw the truth. I wasn't living. I was merely surviving. It was then that something simple happened, yet it changed everything. One morning, my daughter entered my room in a rush. She said I didn't need to worry about helping with lunch anymore, that she had hired someone for that. But it wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. The way she spoke, as if to say, just stay in your corner, you're no longer useful for anything. I smiled, as always. I thanked her, as always. But when she left, I sat on the bed, took a deep breath, and told myself, it's over. Not in a sad way. Not with anger, but with resolve. I understood, in that instant, that I could no longer remain silent. That my soul was screaming for help, and I couldn't pretend I didn't hear it anymore. I needed to get out of there. I needed to breathe air that didn't reek of rejection. I needed to rediscover the woman I once was, who was still somewhere within me. On the same day, I waited for the right moment, went to my daughter, and calmly said, I'm grateful for everything. But I need to go. I need to take care of myself now. She looked at me, surprised. She tried to argue, to say it was dangerous, that I wouldn't manage alone. But this time, I didn't doubt myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the master of my own life again. And that gave me strength. With the help of an old neighbor and the support of a woman from the church I attended, I found a simple but welcoming place. A support home for elderly women, with a small room just for me, a clean bed, and, above all, respect. There, no one saw me as a burden. No one told me to shut up. There, I was heard. And that, my daughter, that heals more than any medicine. I started participating in discussion groups, writing workshops. I even took up embroidery again, something I hadn't done since my children were small. Each stitch I made felt like I was sewing the pieces of my heart back together. I even started writing about my life, and I discovered that there were other women like me, silenced, hurt, but also yearning for a fresh start. And that's when I understood that it's never too late to begin again. That courage has no age. That leaving a place devoid of love is an act of love for oneself. That day, the day I decided to fight back, was the day I was reborn. It was in that new room, small, but filled with peace, that I began to see myself through different eyes. At first, everything seemed strange. I was accustomed to living for others, to being useful, to revolving around someone's needs. Now, there alone, I found myself facing an unforgiving mirror. A mirror that showed me every wrinkle, every trace of time. And, at the same time, silently asked me, who are you now? And I didn't know the answer. But little by little, I began to discover it. It started with the small things. Coffee made by me, on my own time, to my taste. The freedom to choose when to sleep, what to wear, what to eat. The freedom to exist without seeking permission. To move through the house without fear of causing offense. To laugh boisterously. To listen to old music and dance alone in the hallway, unjudged. I began to return to myself. I rediscovered my own tastes. I remembered I loved lavender. That I enjoyed writing letters, even if they were never sent. That my fingers still knew how to embroider flowers and cross stitches as they used to. And when the other ladies in the house saw my needlework, they praised it with a sparkle in their eyes. That which seemed so simple, ignited something within me that I hadn't felt in a long time, pride in myself. One day, during a group discussion, I was asked to share a defining moment from my life. I spoke of a difficult childbirth I faced alone, when no one was nearby. I recounted how I held my daughter in my arms for the first time, crying and praying simultaneously. When I finished speaking, the other women were silent, and one of them, with tears in her eyes, said, "You are stronger than you think." Your story gave me courage. I had never heard that before. In that moment, something within me ignited. I understood that my life, despite so many silences, despite so many hidden pains, could still illuminate someone's path. That my voice, once stifled for so many years, could still touch hearts. I didn't need a stage, nor a crowd. It was enough to be real. I began to write my accounts in a blue-bound notebook. I called it, my rescue diary. In it, I recounted not only what I had lived through, but all that I felt and learned. I wrote as if I were conversing with other women who had also been silenced. And on that paper, I liberated myself a little more with each line. I discovered that the validation I had so desperately sought in the eyes of others had always resided within me. There was no need for approval, nor constant praise. I no longer needed anyone's permission to be happy. Because I understood, and this is far too important not to say aloud, that living at peace with who you are is the most beautiful form of freedom. Today, when I look in the mirror, I still see the wrinkles, yes. But now I see them as medals. Marks of battles won. Scars that tell stories. And you know what? I like the woman I see now. I like her because she survived so much. Because she didn't extinguish herself. Because she had the courage to rediscover herself when everyone thought she had been forgotten. That woman is me. And, for the first time, I love myself. If you've arrived here, listening to my story, perhaps it's because some part of you also carries a hidden pain. A longing, a resentment, an old wound that no one ever truly saw. Perhaps, like me, you've spent your entire life caring for others, and now you find yourself lost within your own existence, wondering if you still have a place in the world. If you still have value. If anyone still sees you. If that's the case, allow me to tell you something, from the bottom of my heart. You are not alone. I know what it's like to smile with wet eyes. I know what it's like to stifle screams from within just to avoid worrying anyone. I know how painful it is to be strong all the time when all you truly wanted was a shoulder to lean on, a long embrace, someone to say, "You matter." But do you know what I learned after so much time? Too much silence sickens the soul. And we weren't born to live diminished, nor invisible. Life has taught me, with both gentleness and pain, that it's never too late to start anew. That it doesn't matter if you're 30, 50, or 80 years old, there's always a door within us waiting to be opened. A light yearning to be born. Sometimes all we need is to take a step towards ourselves. I needed to lose my footing to rediscover my roots. I needed to distance myself from those I loved most to remember that I needed to love myself too. And it all began the moment I stopped waiting for others' recognition, and started listening to myself. In the quiet of my room, between one embroidery and another, I heard my soul call my name. And there, I understood that I am not just a mother, nor just a grandmother. I am a woman. I am a story. I am life. So, if today you're feeling forgotten, devalued, alone, take a deep breath. Breathe with your heart. Remember who you once were. Remember the strength that brought you this far. You've been through so much, and you're still standing. That, in itself, is a miracle. And if no one has told you this today, allow me to say it. You are important. You are worthy of love. You can still flourish, even in arid soil. Don't hide from yourself. Don't think it's too late. If you're still breathing, it's because your story isn't over. Perhaps the new beginning is right here, exactly where you are now, within your own chest. And believe me, God doesn't forget us. Sometimes, what feels like abandonment is merely the silence before rebirth. I was reborn, and if I could do it, so can you. And if this story has touched your heart in any way, if you saw a sliver of your life reflected within mine, then sharing all of this with you has already been worthwhile. Thank you so much for listening to me this far. for dedicating your time, your attention, and perhaps even a few tears alongside me. It is because of people like you that I continue to believe that love still resides in the details, even in such a hurried world. If this message resonated with you, I cordially invite you. Subscribe to this channel. This not only helps carry this story to more people, but also keeps this space alive. A place where we can talk about pain, yes, but also about healing, new beginnings, and hope. Leave your like, comment below what this story awakened in you, and if you know someone who also needs to hear these words, share it. You might be the breath of light in someone's day. And never forget, you still have so much to live for. Because where there is life, there is a path. And where there is love, there is always a new beginning. A kiss upon your heart. Until the next story.